I want to take the time to do a little preview shout out. This episode, Sarah Symons is going to talk about how she left her very safe community in Cape Cod as a songwriter successfully for soap operas and took herself on the front lines in India to fight human trafficking. And because Sarah did this, there are women and there are children in the area of India that their future is that much brighter. Their trajectory in life is that much more hopeful. So she has a compelling story about how she did that. And you'll learn a lot about entrepreneurship because she has the women sell products and go into business together so that they can be empowered to earn a livable wage. Now, as an anti-trafficking advocate, it doesn't mean that you have to drop what you're doing, travel halfway around the world to make a difference. You can make a difference around the world. You can make a difference right in your own community. But what you have to understand is that you will never gain anyone's approval by begging for it or by waiting for it. When you stand confidently in your own worth, then you can go forward and be the advocate that you always wanted to be. Because wanting change and being willing to change, you understand, are two different things. Someone said, what you seek is also seeking you. So I want to tell you about an exciting new project that's going to be happening in 2020. And in 2020, we're going to build a community, the Emancipation Nation Network. And you'll be able to get online and network with advocates all across the U.S. and around the world. You'll become a member of this community of anti-trafficking advocates, and you'll learn from and you'll share information with them. You'll have access to formal courses, informal networking. You'll be able to save lots of time. Instead of looking up research and practices and best responses, it will be located in this one spot. You'll learn to implement effective, resourced, and funded responses to fight trafficking. So it's very exciting. You'll be able to live your passion in ways that further your professional career and also provide you with the financial stability you need to effectively fight trafficking. I mean, let's face it. Money can be used for good things, and you need money because money helps you sustain your home life so that you can go out in your community and into the world and effectively fight trafficking. So stay tuned because I'm going to be sending you an email telling you about it and also asking you some questions about what you'd like to see in this community. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please subscribe or email me at Celia, Celia, at CeliaWilliamson.com and let me know that you're interested in this type of network. This is going to be your community. So let me know what you want to see in your community. Be thinking about that. And now on to the amazing Sarah Symons. You know the why human trafficking work is needed, to fight for the freedom of modern-day slaves. But love, passion, commitment isn't all you need to be an effective and successful anti-trafficking advocate. Learn the how. I'm Dr. Celia Williamson, Director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast, where I'll provide you with the latest and best methods, policy, and practice discussed by experienced experts in the field so that you can cut through the noise, save time, and be about the work of saving lives. Okay, welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast. Today we have Sarah Symons. She's going to be talking about an organization, a nonprofit that she developed. It's amazing. It's international. And so she's really going to talk about how she got it started, what it does, and really break it down for people that might be interested in contributing to her organization or might be interested in learning how they can do something very similar. She's been at this for a while. Her organization's been open since 2005. So welcome, Sarah. I'm so happy that you had time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Celia. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so tell us, so you were a songwriter, working for television, and how does somebody doing that, which sounds amazing, go all the way to doing a nonprofit in India and Nepal? How does that even happen?
Well, it was a completely unexpected pivot in my life, for sure. I was writing songs for film and television and primarily getting them put into soap operas during the love and death scenes. And I had two very small children. I was living on Cape Cod. So I certainly wasn't planning or expecting to start a nonprofit to fight child trafficking and gender violence across the world. But what happened was one of my songs got placed into a film, and the film was put into the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. And it was sung by a very famous person, Emmy Rossum. So I was really excited, and I went down to New York City to hear the song and see this feature film that it was in. And while I was there, I had a free ticket to see any other films in the festival. And it was just so fortunate that one of the films that was available, in fact, the only film in the time slot that I had available, was a documentary about human trafficking called The Day My God Died. And seeing that film truly changed my life. Really, in the course of the 90 minutes of the film, I was just so moved and upset, horrified, inspired, all of those things. And at the end of the movie, I decided that I was going to make a complete about face in my life and devote myself to doing something about human trafficking. And because the film, it did focus on the trafficking of young girls between Nepal and India for sexual exploitation, that is where I started my work. And really, that is primarily where the work remains today. The headquarters and focus is in Nepal and also in Calcutta, just across the border from Nepal.
Wow, that's amazing. What year did that happen?
So the film, I saw the film in 2003. And first I spent a year volunteering and learning as much as I could. I really, I didn't want to dive in and just be, stupid about it. And, just, I didn't have a background or knowledge of the cause. So I felt it was very, very important to get myself educated first. But I also, after seeing the movie and making this decision, was not sure where to start. And so I started by reaching out to two of the organizations that were featured in the film. And one of them, Mighty Nepal, had some volunteers that were working for them just an hour from my house. So that was really, really fortunate. And I was able to get involved with them and start helping with fundraising and communications. And meanwhile, in every spare moment that I had, just really researching and read lots of books, got online, tried to understand the issue better, as it appears throughout the world, but particularly in South Asia. And then after a year, I was invited to go over and see for myself and had another series of really powerful and life-changing experiences there. Well, during that trip, I had asked the director of that shelter, Mighty Nepal, what kinds of help she needed most and where I could best be of service. And she said, please work on vocational training and job opportunities for our older survivors.
When you left that film festival, what were the feelings that you connected to so deeply that had you change your entire path? And then what were the experiences when you went to visit? You said some life-changing experiences. What were those?
Well, starting with the film, I feel very fortunate that was the film that I saw because it really highlighted certainly the breadth of this issue, how it's affecting millions of people and really it's preying on the most vulnerable members of society. And so it was definitely the distress and, really the despair that survivors or victims were facing that was highlighted in this film. For example, it showed, a girl who was trafficked at the age of 7, and she had permanent spinal damage from just, having these full-grown men on top of her as such a young girl. And it showed, a young woman who was trafficked at the age of 12 after her father died and contracted HIV during the time that she was trafficked over in India. So there were stories like that, which were very powerful. But more than that, there were many stories of people who had just taken the situation and tried to do something about it. Whether they were coming from a very professional background of, international development or nonprofit work, or whether it was just a local person who saw this happening in their community and decided, to take steps and to help survivors individually. It just highlighted a bunch of people all over the world who were doing something about the issue and having an impact. And one of them was that girl I told you about who was trafficked at the age of 12 and contracted HIV, and then came back to Nepal, rejected by her family, outcast from society, still, having very few skills. And despite all of those obstacles, she had become an activist and was every single day going to the border and helping the border police to identify trafficking situations in progress and to prevent them from happening, because she knew what to look for. She could kind of sniff it out, and she was using the pain to become a very powerful activist and preventing many, many other girls from having to endure that horror that she endured. So it was people like her and her specifically and others in the film who inspired me, because I saw these different people that they were taking action, that it was in many different ways and from many different backgrounds and skill sets, that they were finding a way to become abolitionists and to help others become free or remain free or prevent people from being trapped in the first place. And so through their example, I said, if those people can all find a way to do it, and especially this girl, Anita, who has since passed away, if they can find a way to do it with all the challenges they're facing, then I too can find a way to have an impact, even though it was not immediately obvious how, because, I was a songwriter of, songs for soap operas living on Cape Cod. It wasn't obvious to me how I could help, especially in India and Nepal. So that's why, like say, I took the year to learn and listen, rather than immediately, diving right in with a solution. I think that there's a very natural tendency to do that. We all, we're moved by our, humanity, and by our distress at the situation, and want to take immediate action and, rush in and rescue everybody. But that's, unlikely to be very effective, because we're probably, or like myself, coming to it from a place of a lack of experience and knowledge of the issue. And there's obviously a lot of great work already being done. And so my goal was not to reinvent the wheel, but to really listen and learn and find out what great work was being done and where there are gaps that maybe I could help to fill, and to be passionate about collaboration, which I still very, very much am. I think it's the only way we're going to eradicate slavery, again, is through deep collaboration. And there are many different ways of attacking the issue. No one person or group has all the answers. I think we have to work together. So that was my, philosophy. And then your second question, what happened when I went over there? I think for me, seeing survivors and meeting them for the first time, and there were about 400 survivors at that shelter at the time. Many of them had been rescued with very young children, so there was a large number of babies and toddlers running around. And as you know, I'm sure, one of the ways that the traffickers keep people enslaved without the need for chains and locks is just by them having a baby. And many girls are encouraged to have a baby very early on in experience, which then becomes, a natural way to keep them there, because nobody's going to leave their baby. And the babies are kept under control by the traffickers and pimps, and the mother is given sort of limited access to her own child. It's just a perfect way to control people and keep them from trying to escape. So many girls had been in that situation. They were rescued with these young children, and just seeing the courage of these survivors, the incredible recovery that many of them were enjoying, was very life-changing, and just the joy that people were finding, despite terrible circumstances, really unimaginable circumstances and suffering that they've been through. And I guess one of the most powerful moments for me as a mother was when a mother came to the shelter, and she was a tribal woman who had literally been walking for days to come from a very remote area to Kathmandu, where the shelter was, and clutching in her hands this dog-eared Polaroid photo of her daughter, who had been missing for 11 days. And just, as a mom myself, and looking into her eyes, and, she knew, and we all knew, that her daughter had almost certainly been trafficked, and that the odds of finding her and recovering her were small. And so I felt like, both for these girls and these babies, and for this mother and all the other mothers, I just had to find a way to keep going, and to find a way to be of service. So as I said, I asked that woman who ran that shelter, and then subsequently many other groups, and some of whom became partners, what is needed, what's working, where would you like to have more support, how can I help, and use that as the blueprint for how to move forward.
Yes. And so, I'm dying to know, did you ever find out if the woman found her daughter?
I did not find out if that particular woman found her daughter. I did, over the years, get very involved with the group on the India side that receives those reports. So when those reports come in, and when a mother comes or father and it reports a missing girl, they take the report and they take the photo and take all the information, and then they send it over to a group in India that's their partner, called Rescue Foundation. The Rescue Foundation has this giant file, and when those reports come in, they very aggressively try to find them, and in many, many cases they do find both the girl that's been reported missing and many others through, kind of a very impressive and complicated system of investigation and in-brothel counseling, and then rescue raids.
Wow. And so how did you come about the name of her future coalition, and what does it do?
So the name it was originally called Made by Survivors, because, as I mentioned, our initial focus was on working on vocational training and employment that would allow survivors who were older, by that I mean 16 plus, and maybe they don't want to go back to elementary school, but they really are at that point in their life where they want to earn a living and become independent. So we started working on trying to find opportunities for them. And one of the things that we found was the artisan crafts that the girls were making in the shelters. And many of them had already had some experience with those kinds of things from their village and from their culture. And then they were given additional training at the shelters. And so we started taking those products and selling in the United States. So we were called Made by Survivors, which we thought was a terrific name. We thought it was very, hopeful, and it kind of described what we did. Over the years, what we did expanded, and the focus moved beyond vocational training and into education of all types, which is still a primary focus for us, and also providing shelters. So we've built shelters, and we support them, and we expand shelters and all that stuff. So the mission had evolved, but still we built up name recognition as Made by Survivors and SEO and all that. So I was very surprised when a few years ago, while visiting one of our centers in India, the survivors sat me down and asked me to change it. And they said, it was meant to be hopeful. It's survivor, not victim, but it still means that the first thing people see is the worst thing that ever happened. And people ask, survivors of what? And it becomes, stigmatizing even in that way. And because one of our, projects that is a highlight project is that we've trained survivors and high-risk girls as some of India's first women goldsmiths, and they're really pioneers and, feminists and activists in that way. They wanted to be able to put their face on the jewelry designs that they created and be associated with those. But because it was called Made by Survivors, they felt a little hesitant and embarrassed to do so, and didn't want those kind of questions about their personal lives, and wanted something that reflected the future. So we brainstormed and we came up with Her Future Coalition, which is currently our name. And I feel like that's going to stay our name because it really reflects what this is all about, which is taking people from a place of hopelessness and feeling like they have no future to helping them create the future of their dreams. And whether that's being, an artisan, a doctor, a social worker, a policewoman, a million other things, accountants, mothers, whatever they're excited about, whatever means a brilliant future to them. We provide long-term intensive services that allow them to create that.
And so how did you, what are the products that they make, and how did you come about the raw materials and the training for them to make the products?
So currently the primary products that they make are metal jewelry, silver and gold dipped brass jewelry. And so that was a whole adventure of itself. So for the first few years of Made by Survivors, now Her Future, we were working with the products that girls were making in the shelter homes, which were textiles and lots of embroidery. But we saw the limitations of that, and that those are traditionally female professions, and unfortunately thus usually not valued or paid very well. And we weren't seeing the transformational kind of opportunities and employment that we wanted to be able to offer. So we were looking for a career path that was traditionally done by men and that would have a higher value that would allow us to pay a more transformational wage. And so we happened upon metalsmithing. And initially, we could not find female metalsmiths within India or Nepal. So we brought them from the United States and the UK. But over time, that project started in 2010. And over time, we have trained many incredible women in country who are now leading the charge and training the next generation. Oh. We buy the materials locally and try to be as sustainable as we can, because obviously the environment and the degradation of the environment really plays into people getting trafficked. So we want to really be positive in creating positive change in every way that we possibly can, including our packaging and our metal sourcing and recycling, what have you.
That's awesome. And where do you get funding where'd you get your startup funding? And do you have any funding that comes in to sustain the program, or does it all sustain itself on the products that you sell?
It definitely doesn't sustain itself on products, because we have, as I said, a lot of other programs that don't generate income, like that just cost money, like shelter and education. Yeah. But so the initial startup money, my husband and I decided to sell our house and use our savings to get it started, which I know a lot of people do and call it crazy, but that's what we did to get the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. And then after that, we started getting grants. We don't receive government funding, so we're funded now through grants and through individual donations, and many, many wonderful people who might give a small amount or a large amount, but together it keeps it going.
Wow. And so can I ask, with the shelter, with the education, with the vocation, what's your annual budget amount? What's the average annual budget?
About $500,000.
Wow.
And we, it's a small amount because we serve, we sort of provide, long-term intensive services, not just a drop-in workshop or a one-time thing. We usually serve about 750 girls a year. The way we do it is that most of our staff are in country, and we just have 1.5 U.S. staff members, and so that's one of the ways that we keep our costs really low.
750 girls per year. That's amazing. And so, what are some of the educational programs or vocational programs that you offer or talk about?
Well, one program that I'm really excited about, it's a relatively new program, is our red light drop-in centers. So we currently have 3 of these, and we're hoping to develop several more. And this is a place where kids who are born into brothel communities can go and receive education and tutoring and counseling and food And also, most importantly, that they can be safe during the hours when their moms are seeing customers.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm sure you know, girls who grow up in red light areas, and boys too, they're almost certainly going to end up being exploited or repeating these cycles of exploitation,
Mm-hmm.
becoming involved in the industry unless there's an intervention that would be fairly intensive. And most families, they just have one room in the brothel, and it might not even really have walls. It might be separated by curtains. So when the mom is seeing clients, the kids, if they're very small, they can be, under the bed or whatever, hiding. But if they're older, that's not really a good option, and they're incredibly vulnerable to being abused. Like about 90% of girls are sexually assaulted by the age of 8 who are growing up in these red light areas. So with the red light research centers, our goal is to get them, but primarily, first and foremost, just out of that situation so they can come to the center from early in the morning until very late at night, and then when their mother, is done, can pick them up, and so they can be safe from being sexually assaulted or trafficked. But then it's also a very deep educational intervention. So first there'd be, remedial education to help them get up to the level where they can join a mainstream school, because many of these kids aren't in school at all, or their education has been, continuously interrupted. And you can imagine too that it's hard for them to be successful. They're tired. They've been, wandering the streets all night trying to avoid, customers. They're hungry. Their nutrition's very poor. And so they just need these basic things to, so they can be successful at all in school. And then, as they stay in the program longer, we are able to provide them with, more intensive services and tutoring and computers and enrichments that enable them to be more successful, and then ultimately sponsoring them for college.
Wow. And so do you have, you mentioned something about vocational programs. Do you have training that educates women to go into various jobs, or is the jewelry the vocation?
The jewelry is certainly a primary one, and we operate that at various locations. But we also provide vocational training and support vocational training in cooking and catering and block printing and sewing. And then for people who maybe want to do something outside of those areas where we have something specific, then we fund the vocational training in their choice. So, hairdressing or whatever it is that they're into, it's just part of our educational sponsorship that they can choose that vocational track, and we'll fund them in that.
That's cool.
Again, it's really about choices, because they have been denied every kind of choice when they're trafficked, or even as a girl growing up in a traditional family in India or Nepal, they've probably been doing like relentless menial labor, or haven't had opportunities to go to school, and haven't had choices about anything, who they're going to marry, or what they're going to study, or anything. So it's very important to us to not have, one size fits all solution. And I really also want to encourage everyone who's thinking about working in this field or already working in this field to really consider that, to make sure that if you're, offering options, it's not just one, because everyone's different. Not everyone wants to be a jeweler, and not everyone wants to be a nurse. And I think it's just about really being very mindful and open and listening, first and foremost to the people you serve, but also to the incredible people working locally. And a big part of our success has been developing very deep partnerships with local organizations. And like, for example, in India, they've had an anti-trafficking movement since 1949, when people started, being trafficked immediately after partition. And so they have had organizations working on this issue since 1949, and we haven't here in North America. So there's a lot to be learned, and I think it's really important to not have any kind of savior complex, but to come in with an open mind and really see the amazing work that's already happening and be respectful of that. And we've been able to develop some partnerships over years. Like some of them are 10 years old, 11 years old. And so at this point, there's deep trust, and we can really accomplish a lot more together than either one of our organizations could working alone.
Yeah, I love that you use the term deep trust. deep partnership, because the last thing we want to do is run in like we just discovered trafficking and now we're going to take care of it. Thank you very much. We got it. Without honoring the people that have been there years and decades doing this work, and to actually be invited to the table to partner and collaborate, and learn and listen. We don't have all the answers. We need to listen and learn. And I think that's a critical component, of what you're talking about. And even in, using the word coalition, as you talk about the name of, the whole thing and about partnership, that's so critical and so important. And so, what are the things that absolutely makes you feel fantastic and wonderful that this is the path, you're going down the right path? And what are the things that you wake up and say, I wish that I didn't have to deal with that? And of course, trafficking, but what is it that stresses you out and you wish you didn't have to deal with?
Those are both great questions. Well, the first one is easy to answer. It really is in individual lives, like seeing girls grow up empowered and free and strong and fulfilling, their dreams. I think as the organization gets older, girls have grown up in it and they are now doing the most incredible things. And almost every single one of them is paying it forward in some way. They're rescuing others. They're preventing their niece from being trafficked. They're pulling their mom out of the red light area. They're, arguing in court. They're doing just unbelievable things. And just feeling, that feeling of knowing that you contributed to that in any way is incredibly motivating. And has become, very, very close to many of the girls. They're like daughters to me. And so, their success feels just like with one of my own kids, like an incredible, joy. And especially knowing where they've come through, it is incredible. Even as something as simple as getting married, something that they probably never thought would be possible for them. But when they get married, and that's so joyful. When they get their first apartment, and I always try to go visit when they get their first apartment, and I was like, this looks just like my first apartment. Just like a room, and your stuff's on the floor, and you don't have furniture yet. I love it. I love that feeling of just seeing them, take the steps forward. Yes. And then I also am incredibly moved and inspired when they take the steps forward for themselves and for their family and their community, and start really, doing stuff like a bunch of them, were in the Women's March, and, just seeing the array of things that these girls are doing, and a few amazing boys as well, is the greatest joy and the best part of the work. The hardest part, other than, obviously trafficking itself, I'd say there's two things. And one is just like, obviously it's stressful to continually try to find funding. And that was, I would wish there was like some magical solution there. And I know that there isn't, but it definitely would be great to be able to not have a long waiting list of girls, and to be able to say, whoever's in this community that wants to come to this resource center, or whoever needs, is a survivor that needs to be sponsored for college, or whoever is needing, if there's a shelter one of our partners needs to build or support, that we would be able to answer that call, and not have to, kind of put things on a waiting list and prioritize them. That can be kind of painful, because, there's really no right answer, right? All of those needs are important and valuable. And I hate to let girls down. So, I guess that's one big one. And I guess the other one is, I've seen so much progress in public awareness and, the law enforcement response. And I really have seen great progress, but there's just still so far to go. And it breaks my heart when people are ignorant of it, or worse than ignorant, judgmental of communities that, have been impacted by trafficking, people who, turn away from them or blame the victim. And I still feel like there's a lot of that going on. And that is really, really hard. And it's just like, it doesn't have to be everyone's issue, but I feel like everyone needs to care and be aware of it and understand the root causes of it and work together to, try to make it a safer world for women and girls.
And so how did you even convince your husband, hey, let's sell our house and we're gonna build this business in another country that supports people that we haven't even met yet, some of them. Did he just go along with that, or how did you even get him to even consider that?
Well, he is an incredibly generous and open-minded guy. I will say that. The day that I saw the movie, we met for lunch. He was in New York for business. He's an investment banker at that time. And I said, I've seen this movie. It's going to change my life. And he's like, cool, great. Now, of course, at that point, he didn't know the extent to which it was going to change his life and our children's lives. And, it might have been a little bit more circumspect. We've known the whole story, but it really just unfolded step by step. And just like me, as he became exposed to me, the real people behind this, it's so, it became very easy to make those decisions because he met the girls and he grew to care about them, and he met women and he saw the need and how relatively easy it would be to make a big impact. And so, he decided to leave his job and we used the money that we had saved up until then. And he's worked on it really, really hard as well. We really started it together.
I think that's such a smart move to take him with you so he could see it himself. I think that was genius. And so I know you also did a TED Talk about living heroically and talking about the women that you serve and how they live heroically, and you create an environment where women can become empowered and girls and boys can become empowered. But I really think you also live heroically. So how can people get in touch with you? Because we definitely have to get some of our listeners, some more donors so that you can expand your work and not have this waiting list. So where can people get a hold of you? And there might be people that also want to create something in various parts of the world that are similar to what you created. So how can they get in touch with you?
Well, first of all, thank you for your very kind words. I really deeply appreciate that. And people can get in touch with us through our website, www.herfuturecoalition.org, and contact us there, as well as learning a lot more about what we do and how we do it. And if other people are considering doing this somewhere else in the world, I'd love to talk to you and share any insights that I possibly can. I've written a book about it called This Is No Ordinary Joy, which gives you like a lot more detail than you might want about me and this work and the many ups and downs. But if you're thinking of starting it, you might find that to be a helpful resource of starting something yourself. And then please do follow us on social media, Instagram and Facebook. And we really are trying to grow our communities there. And that's a great way to stay in touch with us as well.
And Sarah, what's the name of the book and where can people find it?
It's on Amazon and it's called This Is No Ordinary Joy.
Excellent. That's a great title as well. So yes, pick up the book, learn all about how you did what you do, in case someone else would like to do it as well. Do you ever do speaking engagements? Do you do any online teaching or training?
Well, this isn't going to come as a surprise to you, Celia. I love talking. I love sharing. I love sharing the story. I love sharing about the girls and about the work and all. I love speaking engagements, and I do quite a few of them. And I'm trying to really actually build that part of my work in 2020. So if anyone has speaking engagements, please do be in touch. Haven't done any online teachings or trainings, although that's a terrific idea. And I'm actually going to be writing another book in 2020. So maybe I'll think about putting some online teachings and trainings as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to develop a workbook and do an online class for sure. But I know you're busy enough, so I'm not going to put something else on your plate.
But any parting words for people who are advocates out there or thinking about being advocates?
Well, I mean, I think I've given my advice to everyone, which is like, study up first. You know, don't go in blind, right? Figure out where you can have the most impact, and then reach out to people who are already doing the work in that issue area or in that geographical area where you want to work, and figure out if you can partner up with them and support what they're doing, or at least, you know, learn from them and gain insights from it, you know, before diving in. But even beyond all that, I would say the energy for me and for our team to do this work, it comes from the girls. They are so worth it. And, you know, however you choose to engage with this issue, if you do, I truly believe your own life's going to be transformed in such a positive way through interactions with the courageous and heroic people out there, the survivors and the people who are helping them. So I invite you to just dive in and take the steps and move forward, and it will not only have a positive impact on the world, but on yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Queen. I appreciate everything that you do for the world.
Thank you so much for having me and for listening.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, it takes courage to release the familiar and seemingly secure, and to embrace the new. But there is no security in what is no longer meaningful to you. There's more security in the adventures and the excitement in getting involved in the movement. There's life in the change. There's power in the change. I didn't say that. Alan Cohen said that. But that's exactly what Sarah did. And Sarah has done amazing work. Thank you, Sarah, for inspiring us all to continue the fight. If you like this episode of Emancipation Nation, please subscribe and I'll send you the weekly podcast. Until then, the fight continues.